The views and opinions expressed in this podcast are simply that, opinions. All are presumed innocent until proven otherwise in a court of law. Sensitive topics are discussed. Discretion is advised.
In Ohio, the brutal murders of Spencer and Monique Tepe shook a community when the couple was found shot to death in their home. It was a mystery and a manhunt until investigators made an arrest. Prosecutors say Monique's ex-husband, Dr. Michael McKee, alone carried out the killings. New reporting reveals McKee had been seen on the Tepe property weeks before the murders. Why was he there, and did Monique know? Authorities say McKee's prior presence and movements raise fresh questions about premeditation as detectives attempt to reconstruct his timeline in the days leading up to the shootings. Friends and neighbors recall Spencer and Monique as loving parents, making the murders all the more chilling. McKee's defense has yet to respond, but he has pleaded not guilty, and tonight we break down all the new information. But first, newly unsealed autopsy reports in the brutal murders of 4 University of Idaho students reveal the harrowing final moments. Investigators say the killers stabbed Kaylee Goncalves, Madison Mogen, Xana Kernodle, and Ethan Chapin more than 100 times. These new details showing the horror of the night, the violence of the night, and the evil within the killer. Tonight, we will go through all this new information and ask the question, why didn't prosecutors seek the death penalty for this monster? I'm Vinnie Politan. Thank you so much for joining us tonight here on Closing Arguments, and we've got some new material to show you from the Idaho 4 case. And let me tell you, worse than we thought. And we thought the worst of this guy. But could you imagine that the information as it's coming out, revealing a scene inside that home that you can't imagine, the attack on these 4 young people and what they were subjected to. Unreal. We've got the details for you tonight. Horrific bloodshed in that house. This was kill, this was overkill, this was, I mean, the picture that's painted in my mind tonight is a sort of a manic episode where this guy just has the adrenaline going through the roof and is just taking it out on the next person that he sees. And once you hear these details, you're going to be really surprised that he did not go after Dylan. Because remember, Dylan sees him. I don't know if he sees her, but amazing that in light of what we're learning now, that 2 people were spared in that house. Now, the other part of this, once you hear and you'll get the details of all this horror, the prosecutor gave him a deal. I cannot get over this. I still cannot get over this. And the reason being, it is a state that has the death penalty. And if you don't seek it against this guy, then who would, wait till you hear the details. Who else would be eligible for this? This is who it's designed for. But the prosecutor gave him a deal. And that's why I always ask the question, did they get justice? And you can say, well, some of the families didn't want the death penalty. At the end of the day, should the worst of the worst be punished, the most severe? At the end of the day, in a state that has the death penalty, meaning the people of that state elected people into office who put that on the books, which means the people want it in that state. But you're not giving it to him, so is that truly justice? We could talk about that, but first, let's dive into some of these new details and to help us understand the findings from the autopsies. I want to bring in forensic death investigator, host of the very popular Body Bags with Joseph Scott Morgan. Joseph Scott Morgan is with us. Thanks so much for being here. This is going to be a tough...
Of course, man.
This is going to be a tough little segment, but I brought you in because you understand these death scenes. You can put some context and perspective for us. So I want to start with Zana, and let me read some of the stuff, and then you can kind of break it down for us. Cause of death: multiple sharp force injuries while also suffering abrasions and contusion of the head, torso, and extremities. Awake at the time of the attack. 67 stab wounds. 25 incised wounds of the upper extremities. 23 stab and incised wounds of the scalp, face, and neck. 7 stab wounds of the chest. 4 stab wounds of the abdomen. 3 incised and puncture wounds of the back. 5 incised wounds of the lower extremities. Punctures of the outer table of the skull. Perforations of the jugular vein, heart, lung, and pulmonary blood vessels. Hemorrhage into the chest cavities. Wounds extending into the bones of the right hand. Scrapes and bruises on the face, torso, and extremities. Blood on the bottoms of her feet. Joseph Scott Morgan, what story is this telling about what happened to Xana?
Well, let's start with the feet, Ben. I know that seems rather innocuous, but that gives us evidence that she was upright and mobile, at least for a few moments, that she fought. You don't get this contact trace blood elements on the feet without that having occurred. And then we move to the hands. This is evidence of an awareness, because these sound to me, at least, as though these are consistent with defensive wounds. So she's parrying any kind of attack like this back, trying to block. She's awake and alert at that moment in time. And then you begin to get into all of these other planes of the body that are insulted. So it's not as though that the perpetrator is merely advancing on her face to face. She's whirling about, okay, because you've got insults posteriorly, anteriorly. You've got them on multiple surfaces of the skull and the face. And it's not just sharp force injuries, Vin. They talk about incised wounds, which are slices. You have stab wounds, which are penetrative wounds. But then she's also got bruises or contusions, which means we're talking about, in addition to all of this, blunt force trauma. You mentioned a term earlier that I've heard you mention for many years, and I concur with this. This is, in fact, overkill. This is a frenzied event. I can't necessarily go to motivation, but I can tell you, Vin, that cases like this that I've worked over the years, this goes to being fueled by intense anger, fear, all of these sort of things. And if we believe what the narrative is that we've heard over and over, Xana was that kind of, she was that individual that stood between him and getting clear of this environment. He did not expect to encounter her. So he's like a caged animal, with emphasis on animal here, Vin.
Let's get to our next victim, Kaylee Goncalves. Cause of death: multiple sharp force injuries, while also suffering asphyxial injuries and blunt force injuries of the head. Stabbed a minimum of 38 times. 24 stab and incised wounds of the scalp, face, and neck. 11 stab and incised wounds of the chest. 3 stab and incised wounds of the upper extremities. Punctures of the outer table of the skull. Injuries to the teeth and tongue. Perforations of the subclavian artery and vein, and hemorrhage into the chest cavities. Blunt force injuries, scalp laceration, bleeding around the brain, nasal fracture, scrapes on the nose and cheeks, bruising around the eyes, patterned bruises extending across the lower face, blood stains on the body, bed, and wall indicate her posture and position changed during this event. What story does this tell about Kerry?
When you think about this child, then let's just go to, because I know a lot of people are curious about this idea of the external table of the skull. And the external table of the skull, there's a top layer to the skull, if you will. So this is a non-penetrative injury to the skull itself. So what this means is, with the utilization of this blade, and keep in mind, this K-bar blade is very robust. At its heart, this is a combat knife, okay? Very resilient, very robust. So if you think about the blade itself kind of glancing off of the skull itself, it will in fact chip that external or outer table of the skull every time that this occurs. Then we begin to think about the hemorrhage that you see inside of the cranial vault. That's because of this concussive event where she's being pummeled. There's a lot of this pummeling that's going on here because the knife and a fist, or the fist wrapped around a knife, he's essentially doing this and then driving the blade, I think, into her face. And if anybody gets a chance to look at the K-bar, if you flip it on its end and you look at the base of this thing, it actually looks like a hammer, okay? And that's what Marines have used this thing for. It's not just a combat knife, but it's a utility knife. So it can be used as a bludgeon. It's fascinating when they begin to talk. Did you notice what you had mentioned? If you go back to that, they talked about a pattern, the pattern injuries. Well, if you have a pattern injury, that means that it marries up with some type of object, right? And my suspicion is that during this kind of blunt force trauma, you've got these patterns that are appearing on the face. And one more thing about this poor young lady is that you said there were a minimum of wounds. Do you know why they're saying that instead of being specifically qualifying there? Because you have intermingled wounds that are communicating with one another. And so even in the autopsy room, when you're trying to make sense of what you're seeing, you'll have cross communications between insults, and sometimes you cannot accurately count them. This is a very concentrated attack all over her. She had an awareness. We think about being in a recumbent position, maybe prone or supine. As she's sleeping, she reacts. She rises to this. So the attitude that she's in physically is adjusting relative to the attacker.
All right, let's go to Kaylee's best friend, Madison Mogen. Cause of death: multiple sharp force injuries, 13 stabbed and incised wounds to the scalp, face, and neck, 10 incised wounds of the upper extremities, 5 stab wounds of the chest, wounds to the lung and liver, perforations of the subclavian vein, subclavian artery, and blood vessels of the chest wall, an incision of the nasal septum, and a perforation of the tongue. One other thing, if you could give us your opinion on, does any of this give you any indication of who may have been murdered first?
Not, you do that at your own peril, and any forensic pathologist or medical legal death investigator out there would say the same thing. All we can merely do is give you an indication of the number of insults that have occurred, the level of trauma. It's very, very difficult to put this in order. I wish we could so desperately, but we can't. It's almost an empirical impossibility to do that. Maddie's injuries are unique to her in the sense that you begin to think about, she's got, if you touch the underside of your nose, this is your septum right here. So she's got an incised injury that literally goes across this area, clips the nasal septum, as it will. So the blade is literally being dragged across her face at this point in time. She's also, again, this facial attack that's going on. And I've thought about this a lot, Vin, in the sense that I think that one of the two young ladies in that room were the target. Obviously, I think that's been talked about extensively. I know that you have, and so have I. But when you combine the level of trauma that both Maddie and Kaylee have sustained inside of this environment, this is almost an effort to disfigure. That's why I think that upon the initial event, when the perpetrator entered into this room, first off, I think this is probably sexually motivated. I think there's an adrenaline dump because this is driven by his lust. I think he's surprised when he gets in there because there's two. So now you're heaping on top of that adrenaline dump. You've got fear and anger that are coming in, and he just goes wild in this environment and begins stabbing them repeatedly over and over and over again. He very well could have gone from body to body. Okay, and that has happened over the course of my career. I've seen that occur. There would be DNA evidence on that knife where you would have commingled DNA, I think probably, and on other surfaces, of course. We don't know where that knife is. Lord only knows. I hope it's found at some point in time, but we don't have it. Both of these girls were extremely disfigured and attacked, whereas if you think about Xana, her wounds are more randomized. They're over multiple planes. These two victims, you have this kind of concentration where he's really focused on the face here, Vin.
Final victim, Ethan Chapin. 6 incised wounds of the upper extremities, 6 stab and incised wounds of the lower extremities, 4 stab and incised wounds of the scalp, face, and neck, 1 stab wound of the upper chest, perforations of the jugular vein, subclavian vein, and subclavian artery.
Yeah. So what stands out to me about Ethan's injuries, specifically the concentration is up here. For folks that are wondering where the subclave is, if you'll find your clavicle, your collarbone right here, the subclavicular clavicle runs beneath there. It's a major blood supply. So you're going to have a lot of internal bleeding with this. It doesn't seem as though that Ethan really moved from the position that he was in. But one thing that's always struck me as odd with Ethan, and I think you probably know where I'm going, Vin, are these insults that he has on his lower extremities. They seem to be incised wounds, and I don't. And look, in the heat of the moment, maybe the confined space in here, you can't explain it because you've got somebody that's reacting in anger. But in that concentration, they're that low on the body. I've never been able to make sense of it or what the purpose of that was. And of course, I don't think that we will ever know that, but Ethan certainly is traumatized to a great extent as well. There is not as much facial disfiguration with him. I don't think that the perpetrator spent as much time in his efforts to kill Ethan as he did the others.
Joseph Scott Morgan, your insight is the best, and it really, I think, gives us all a much clearer understanding of what happened here to these 4 victims, and we appreciate your time tonight. Joseph Scott Morgan, thank you.
You're quite welcome, my friend.
All right, let's bring in our think tank. Joining us tonight, criminal defense attorney, former head New Jersey County prosecutor Bob Bianchi, along with former police lieutenant, trial attorney Rick King, and finally, national parenting and family relationship expert, Dr. Sue Kornbluth. Okay, here's my question I'll throw out to everyone, which is the way this all ended was with a deal. The man who did all the damage that Joseph Scott Morgan just went through, and what these 4 children, they're young adults, but from my perspective, they're children, the suffering, the pain, the wounds, the evilness of what happened and what took place here, he got a deal. And this isn't a debate of the death penalty. Idaho has it. It's on the books. Bob, why don't you start us off?
Well, Vinnie, as a guy who's actually done death penalty litigation, and I'm not a fan of the death penalty, but I've been there. And one of the reasons I'm against the death penalty is because of the chaotic way in which it's administered and not administered. Random decisions by prosecutors to pursue it or not. Yet, when it was the law in the state of New Jersey, it's no longer. I understood that I took an oath that I had to follow the law, not Bob Bianchi's opinion, but what the law says. Now, as you indicated, this state has a death penalty, and this is exactly the reason I'm against it. If not the Kohlberger case, then what case? How is it fair to be putting people on the death penalty for far less egregious murder cases? This is literally sadistic murder multiple victims, a very solid case in the guilt phase. No doubt in my mind, a conviction in the penalty phase. If the death penalty has a picture of what case it is, it's the Koberger case. So not only did the prosecution cave in giving it away, Vinnie, I think you know me well enough to know, even if I felt I was going to lose, I'd rather fight the battle and lose rather than to give it away. You're going to have to take it from me. But they weren't going to lose. And the second and last point that I've got to make with regard to this is the prosecutor offers this deal without requiring the defendant to debrief fully and truthfully the reasons, what fors, wherefores, how come, and motive. He lets the families now have to just kind of figure it out and kind of see this stuff happening over and over again, not really understanding why. I almost think it's like excuse me, but like some sort of emotional breakdown happened with the decision maker on this case, because there is no legal explanation in all the years I've done it. If there was a case that I would pursue for the death penalty, and I'm not a fan of it, it's this one.
I mean, for me, Vinnie, I could not imagine, I could not understand for the life of me why this was not a death penalty case. I mean, this was obviously one of the worst kinds of ways to murder these beautiful young students, and it was full of so much rage and passion. Like he had an agenda to just take out whatever was going on inside of him, and just take it out on these innocent young ladies and gentlemen. And it's just so brutal that I can't imagine why this would not be a death penalty case. I mean, isn't this what the death penalty is all about?
So, Vinnie, first of all, let me say this. Like Bob, and for Bob's reasons and many more, I'm also not a death penalty advocate. And I thought I heard that you earlier. I thought I heard you say that some of the family was against it, and in some ways I can understand that, because what they want is they want fast finality, and they want to avoid the craziness of the appellate process when it comes to the death penalty. I will tell you that listening to the doctor speak or the forensic investigator speak about what that was, very difficult. Despite all my experiences, still very, very difficult to listen to, and my heart goes out to that family. But maybe, and in here in Florida, we have the Marcy's Law, where the victim gets they get a lot of input as to what happens at the conclusion of cases.
No.
And so
no.
Here, I'm sorry. So here,
sorry, Rick. That's why the indictments read the state of such and such versus the victims have rights to be heard. They don't have rights to direct the case. I get it. I know what it's like to bring victims through a trauma like that, but you have an obligation to follow the law, Rick. I'm sorry, the victim's opinions make a difference, but that's even disputed in this particular case. And
well, it was split. It was split 2-2. All right, we're out of time right now because we've got big news in another big case and story that we're covering. Think Tank staying with us. New details in the Tepe murders in Columbus, Ohio, regarding some prior conduct by the defendant, Dr. Michael McKee. Plus, coming up next hour.
Tonight on Vinnie Politan investigates 2 fires, 1 family wiped out. Prosecutors say Paul Canero murdered his own brother, sister-in-law, and their children in a plot fueled by money and resentment. Does the third brother, Corey Canero, need to testify? Tonight, we investigate.
The Court TV podcast will return.
State of Ohio versus Michael McKee. It's 26 CR 253. There are 5 counts. 4 counts of aggravated murder, unclassified felonies, 1 count of aggravated burglary, felony 1. Each of these counts come with a 3 and a 6-year firearm specification.
Brand new details tonight relative to the murders of Spencer and Monique Tepe in Columbus, Ohio. Couples married for 5 years, 2 young children in the house. in the middle of the night. Her ex-husband is the one who has been charged. Michael McKee, Dr. Michael McKee. Believe it or not, vascular surgeon Michael McKee. This is from the Columbus Dispatch, who's doing great work on this case, by the way. Michael McKee, court documents say he stalked Monique before killing the couple. According to court records, they say, video showed McKee going into the area of the Tepe home on December 6th. This is weeks before. And then showed him leaving a few hours later. The affidavit described the area McKee entered as the curtilage, which is legally considered part of the house, but typically thought of as the yard, outdoor buildings, porches, other similar areas. And you know in that house they've got the front, but they have that very unique backyard as well, where they have a garage, sort of a courtyard, and then the house. Okay, the Columbus Dispatch also reporting Michael McKee, the Tepes were at the Big Ten championship football game that night. That's in Indiana, the court records say. Monique left the game at halftime to return to the hotel, and court records say Spencer told friends that Monique was upset about something involving her ex-husband. She was upset about something involving her ex-husband on December the 6th, on the same day where he's on video walking around the curtilage of the property. Probably captured on her video. I wonder if she's seeing the video. Let's bring back in our think tank Bob Bianchi, Rick King, Dr. Sue Kornbluth. Rick, this is very enlightening to me. First of all, so this wasn't like all of a sudden goes to the planning, the plotting. First of all, what the heck is he doing there for a few hours on December 6th?
I mean, you have to imagine if they got him on the curtilage, what that tells me is that he was on the outside of the property somewhere and they saw him, coming onto the property into the yard or the backyard or someplace like that. And probably during that 2-hour time frame that they lose him, he probably, I'm imagining, of course, I don't know any of this, but I'm imagining that he was probably planning some way to get in at that point. Because if you're there for 2 hours and you're within the curtilage, within the, the circumference of the house, you're doing something. And maybe he was trying to foster or plan his way in to the residence.
Yeah, we're looking at this, right? This is that courtyard I was telling you about. That's the garage. On the other side of the garage is that alleyway that he was caught walking down allegedly on the morning of the murders. So the curtilage could be all of this area. What is he doing there, Dr. Sue?
Oh, I think he's casing out the place and planning on how to enter this home and planning what he's going to do, and in terms of, what happened, and that he was so enraged. There's a history of him being enraged. There was a report, I believe, that he had attacked her at one point or forced her to have sex or something like that in an article that I read. But we talked about this, I believe, last week. And I said, you're going to find that there's something with them that was going on, and that he probably was obsessed with her. I still believe that, and wanted to get rid of both of them.
Bob, you think there's any chance, because we know this home has the punch keys. I'm wondering, like, you go online, you can get these little cameras you can stick anywhere and pick up a signal remotely. I mean, it's not that complicated these days. Do you think that was part of this mission, to figure out what the code was so he could come back and get into that house when they were actually home? And how on earth did he know that they were at the Big Ten championship game?
Great points, Vinny. I mean, certainly those things that you're bringing up right now would be part of my investigation. We just don't know that data now, but what we do know is that clearly this was a premeditated attempt of lots of surveillance. I mean, this is not unusual that we see in our prosecutor world. We would always say today's domestic violence and domestic abuse is tomorrow's homicide case. We see lots of people that just can't let go, and they engage in all sorts of surveillance, electronic surveillance. They're putting tracking devices on vehicles and on individuals. And it sounds like this guy is meeting that description exactly. Just a guy that just lost his mind, arrogant, doesn't care, throwing his life away, and he can't have her, and no one's going to have her. And even if he's going to throw his own life away in jail for the rest of his life, that's what he's going to do. Unfortunately, for those who are out there, this is not an uncommon guy. There's a lot of people out there like this.
Yeah. We've got more. This is what Dr. Sue was talking about. Friends of the Teppis told investigators after the couple's death that Monique had told them McKee had been abusive toward her when they were married and had threatened her both during their marriage and after it. At least one witness told investigators that McKee had forced unwanted sex and strangled Monique. According to court records, McKee also made comments about, quote, he could kill her at any time, court records say, and that he would find her and buy the house right next to her, that she will always be his wife. This answers a ton of questions, Rick King, but she couldn't protect herself. She couldn't protect herself. This is like 10 years after the marriage.
Right, and you know, Vinny, when you're looking at this case, there was a restraining order, but it wasn't the kind that we normally associate with. This restraining order was done in the beginning of the divorce to prevent each party from going into the bank account and dissipating funds. But what she needed, and I don't know that it would have actually worked, but at least it would be something. She needed a restraining order to keep him away from her, something to try at least give the police some sort of leverage if he's in the area to make an arrest, if he is doing these type of harmful things to her.
All right, we've got more when we come back. Think Tank staying with us. How did investigators ultimately connect McKee to the crime scene? We've got those details coming up next. Don't go anywhere. Plus, I want to let you know what happened with Sarah Grace Patrick in Georgia. There she is, accused of murdering her mother and her stepfather in their home. She's been locked up. Her trial's not until the summertime it's scheduled for. Tried to get out on bond today, but was denied once again. So Sarah Grace Patrick remains behind bars, and obviously we are tracking the latest in that case.
Now, back to the Court TV podcast.
This individual, Spencer, works with me, and he did not show up to work this morning, and we cannot get a hold of him or his family. He is always on time, and he would contact us if there was any issues whatsoever. And I just don't know how else to say this. Like, we're very, very concerned because this is very out of character. And we can't get in touch with his wife, which is probably the more concerning thing.
I can hear kids inside, and I swear I think I heard one yell. But we can't get in. At this point, I don't know if I need to break the door in or just get in the house or what.
Our boss did not report to work. We haven't been able to get a hold of him for 3 hours. We are on site, and we can hear kids inside.
The body, our friend wasn't answering his phone. We just did a lot of shit. We just can't hear it. He appears dead. Okay. There's blood. He's laying next to his bed, off of his bed, and there's blood.
Such a brutal case, but we're getting more details now on how investigators tracked down Michael McKee. Because remember, he's from Illinois. He's not from there. The affidavit that the Columbus Dispatch got their hands on says, details how Columbus homicide detectives worked to identify a vehicle seen on surveillance footage near the Tepe home before the homicides that left shortly after. All right, so they went through like a timeline. They saw this vehicle arrive, they saw it leave. That vehicle, identified in court records as a silver SUV, had been seen on video several times near the Tepe house. At different times, the SUV, which had distinct features, that's important here, that included a visible sticker on a window, was seen with a stolen Ohio license plate and an Arizona license plate, court records say. The SUV was linked to a past address in Rockford, Illinois, associated with McKee and the hospital where he worked. On January 9th, Columbus police detectives found the SUV in the hospital parking lot where McKee worked, court records say, with fresh scrape marks on the window where the sticker had been seen in videos. So the sticker was there, then it wasn't there, but there were scrape marks, according to investigators. And the SUV is linked to a past address, but the license plates, one was Arizona and one was stolen. A lot to discuss here. Still with me, Bob Bianchi, Rick King, Dr. Sue Kornbluth. Dr. Sue, the first thing to you is that this seems to be a man who is obsessed. This is like the fatal attraction. He is doing anything and everything and plotting and planning this way ahead of time.
Yeah, this is absolutely premeditated, it seems, and that he's thinking about her 24 hours a day. He can't get her off of his mind. This is how they get to the point where they just have to eliminate them, because if he can't have her, Vinny, then nobody else can. And she's living a life with this guy in a way that he wanted to live his life with her, probably. And so he can't deal with the anxiety, the obsessions, the thoughts that are in his mind all the time. And the only way to relieve this and release all of this is to get rid of her. It is so sad, but it's the same characteristics over and over in these guys that commit these crimes towards these women.
All right, Bob and Rick, I want to throw this at you. The fresh scrape marks on the window, is that going to be enough for a jury, number one, to match the vehicles because you don't have the license plate, number one? Number two, how do you think they actually got to his silver vehicle all the way in Rockford, Illinois? Was it the information from the friends about the way he was obsessed and the way he had treated her? Bob, why don't you start us off?
So that's going to be a significant investigative fact. When you're opening up an investigation like this, you don't want to pigeonhole. You want to take data in. You want to run that data down. Now, of course, people that have an acrimonious relationship, the minute I'm listening to that on a crime scene and I'm hearing that she's expressing dissatisfaction with him and that there's some violence or bad history, he's becoming a major suspect. When they are now running down his license plate readers they've got, they must have had information with regard to this van. They're running the plates down. There's lots of ways they can connect these dots. Maybe there's phones, maybe there's electronic records. But to your point you just raised, I think that the scraping of the sticker is not going to help from an identification point of view, help him as far as an identification issue, I don't think. Hopefully they'll have more, but they're going to do an electronic download on this guy, and I think they're going to find all sorts of investigating he was doing, like I said to you in the earlier segment, all sorts of nefarious privacy violations that he was conducting, so that helps build their case. The scraping of the sticker, to me, is pretty sinister. He understands that's an identifiable factor with the van, and he's smart enough to scrape it off to use that as an argument. Hey, it wasn't me. My van doesn't have a sticker. But I think in the end, the jury's going to see that as consciousness of guilt.
That's exactly what I was going to say. The scraping of the sticker is really inconsequential because that's consciousness of guilt. However, here's what kudos to law enforcement, because the tenacity it would have taken to track down this vehicle and all the places that it traveled. Because I'm sure, as Bob said, license plate readers are huge. And I'm sure they tracked those tags and followed those tags and to its natural conclusion. And it just so happens that car ended up coming from that same city where he's from and associated with him in that hospital. So I think all of those things and the tenacity of those investigators that were doing it led to the recovery of that car, tied it to him, and put this case together.
Unbelievable. Unbelievable. Bob, Bob, Rick, and Dr. Sue, great to have you with us. New developments in this case, and obviously we'll continue to cover it and see how it develops. But all of a sudden, I'm starting to see some issues that the defense may have, may not be successful, but it becomes part of that courtroom battle that we watch here on Court TV. Bob Bianchi, Rick King, Dr. Sue Kornbluth, thank you all so much. When we come back, folks, I will reveal something else you need to know tonight, plus coming up next hour.
Tonight on Vinnie Politan Investigates, prosecutors say greed tore a family apart, ending with gunshots, flames, and 4 lives lost. Paul Canero faces life without parole for allegedly killing his brother Keith and Keith's family. What do the victims' bodies reveal about this horrific crime? Tonight, we investigate.
This is the Court TV Podcast.
Welcome back. Time to reveal something else you need to know tonight. Let's take a look at the big board. Expected to testify. That's Brendan Banfield, the defendant in the Au Pair Affair murder trial. His lawyer told the judge that his client was testifying, despite the fact that Brendan Banfield, at the moment, some people read his reaction as surprise, but that's what his lawyer told the judge. Kelly Craft, Court TV legal correspondent, is in Virginia with a big look ahead to tomorrow's dramatic day in court.
Vinnie, after treacherous weather conditions around the D.C. region closed the Fairfax County Courthouse for several days, tomorrow we will be back at it. Court back in session. And the big witness we're looking forward to hearing from is the defendant himself.
Is the defendant going to testify, Mr. Kerr?
Yes.
Yeah, excuse me?
Yes.
He is going to testify.
Brendan Banfield, the former IRS investigator whom prosecutors say stabbed his wife, Christine, to death and killed another man, will have the chance to tell jurors his story. He will have to answer questions about his affair with the au pair.
You began a sexual relationship with the defendant in August of 2022. When you were how old?
I was 21.
The alleged plan to get rid of his wife.
He had heard of a website called Pet Life. He's never done anything on the website, but he heard about it, and that's what he was going to do.
Did he use his wife's electronic devices, and did he stab her?
I was just crouching down on myself and covering my ears and covering my eyes. And a few times I looked, and I was able to see him stabbing her.
Brendan Banfield's credibility will be on the line, and on cross-examination, that credibility will be thoroughly tested. And Vinnie, when court does get back underway tomorrow, defense counsel's digital forensics expert will return to the stand for direct examination. After that witness, defense counsel has one more witness, and then the remaining witness would be Brendan Banfield. That's the latest from here in Fairfax County, Virginia. We'll send it back to you.
All right, Kelly Craft in Virginia. Big day tomorrow. Make sure you're tuning in. Brendan Banfield takes the stand. You want to see and hear what his story is going to be, what his explanation is going to be for all that happened in the build-up to the affair, plus the murder of his wife and Joseph Ryan. All right, folks, please take a look at your television screens. We have a missing child who needs your help tonight. This is Nevaeh Bailey, 17 years old, missing from Winsboro, Louisiana. If you see Nevaeh, please pick up the phone, make a call, make a difference. 911, 1-800-THE-LOST, or you can call the Winsboro Police Department in Louisiana. That number's on your screen right now. Let's see if we can get Nevaeh to a safe place tonight. Don't go anywhere. We have another hour of live true crime. Vinnie Politan Investigates is next. In the meantime, please don't forget to hug the kids.
There you have it. If you want to see more in-depth reporting on the latest true crime stories, you can see me every weeknight, 8 p.m. Eastern on Closing Arguments. Thank you so much for downloading. And as always, please don't forget to hug the kids.
This podcast is a production of Court TV. Go to CourtTV.com for more content, trials on demand, and to find out how to watch Court TV in your area.